And in this video, I'm going to introduce you to a set of careers theories, give a bit of an overview of careers theory across the 20th and the early 21st century. This was initially developed as part of the career leaders course that we run at the University of Derby. So, yeah, as I say, this is an introduction to careers theory for career leaders. The point of this video is to give people who are working at a sort of a mid-level management position in schools an understanding of careers theory, so they can properly understand what careers theory involves, and therefore be able to think through what career development might involve. When people talk about career and how individuals' lives change, or how individuals should make decisions, what are the main ideas that people have used in academic literature to discuss those things? Give you some ideas for how you start thinking about your individual careers programs. So I'm going to talk through 5 main sort of key sort of schools of thought around career development. I'm not going to talk about all of the individual theorists, but I'll give you a bit of an overview about what career development involves. So firstly, matching theory. Matching theory is the oldest set of ideas in career development. It's sometimes viewed as like a shape sorter model. The idea is that in order for people to make good choices about their careers and their futures, you need to understand who they are themselves, and they need to understand the opportunities available to them. And you kind of need a clear enough and logical enough way of defining those two things so you can see whether they fit together or not. So you might say that through some self-reflection or filling out an online quiz or something, that you come to the conclusion that you are a triangle-shaped person. You then need to find triangle-shaped careers that you will fit into. If you are a triangle-shaped person and you look at circle-shaped careers, then the two aren't going to go together. So matching theory is about the sort of idea of trying to find fit between what individuals are like and the opportunities that are available to them. So Frank Parsons, he's sort of the great grandfather, if you will, of career development. Was one of the first people to really try and describe what career development looked like as a proper discipline. Working in Chicago at the turn of the 20th century, he described 3 conditions for what individuals needed in order to manage their careers. So he said, firstly, individuals should come up with an accurate understanding of their individual traits. Secondly, they should have a knowledge of jobs and the labour market. And thirdly, they should have a rational and objective judgment about the relationship between these 2 things, their traits and the labour market. So understand what you're like. Are you a circle? Are you a triangle? Are you a hexagon? Are you a star? Are you a rhombus? So on and so forth. And then accurately think about the labour market, think about the roles available to you, what circle jobs are there, what triangle jobs are there, what rhombus-shaped jobs are there, and then be able to bring the 2 together. So you need to be able to go, okay, so I'm a circle, here are some circle-shaped jobs, therefore the way of bringing them together is think, well, I would fit a circle-shaped job. I wouldn't fit a non-circle-shaped job. So you have sort of self-awareness, opportunity awareness, and the ability to make decisions. And those are based on what he sees as an accurate understanding of the individual and right knowledge of jobs in the labour market. So this is trying to, working in those sorts of times, really trying to sort of distill the individual down to an accurate understanding your jobs like a clear sort of objective manner. So Parsons is an example of matching theory, and his work is sort of foundational for lots of ideas that are developed around career development. The next person we're going to look at is John Holland. So what Holland did was kind of looked at Parsons and said, well, so Parsons talked about accurate knowledge of self and accurate knowledge of opportunities, but he didn't really define what those things were. So writing initially in the 1950s, Holland came up with this hexagon, these 6 key categories, which describe what right knowledge of self should look like. He says that everybody should fit primarily into one of these 6 key areas, which describes the things that they're best at. So not mean to go into lots of detail, but are you an investigative person, somebody who's good at dealing and sort of thinking through information and sort of solving problems? Are you an artistic problem? Are you good at sort of coming up with new ideas and sort of creative solutions? Are you a social person? Are you good at sort of helping other people and working alongside other people to help them achieve their goals? Are you an enterprising person? So rather than being a helper, are you more of a persuader? Are you a leader? Are you a seller? Are you an arguer? Maybe you're a conventional person. You're somebody who's good at organizing things. You're sort of a good project manager. You work well around systems. Or finally, are you a doer, somebody with good sort of hands-on skills, whether it's a sports person or maybe a crafts person, somebody who works with machinery. See that people would have these fundamental skills, and then these fundamental skills would correspond to different careers. So somebody who is social and good at helping would work well as a nurse or work well as a teacher. They would probably work less well as an engineer or less well as a project manager. So it sort of identifies on the basis of your skills which jobs you're most likely to fit into. Um, Holland is, and this sort of this hexagon idea is used behind lots of sort of career development tools. So if you use Kudos or other sort of online career quizzes, you've probably unknowingly made use of Holland before. And there's some real strength to the sort of the simplicity that he uses. If you're able to work out which of these categories you fit into, and he suggests doing this through completing a quiz, which he called the self-directed search. Then you're able to classify jobs in the same way. Then you're able to go, I'm a thinker. That's a thinking-based job. I would be a good fit for that profession. There are a few sort of obvious problems with Holland, which are worth sort of thinking through. The first is you've really got to be able to, if you're going to make good matches, you've got to have like an exhaustive knowledge of all the jobs available to you. So one problem with things like Kudos is that it's not always doesn't always know of all of the available options, isn't able to pick out slightly more niche areas of the labour market, and it definitely isn't able to predict future jobs, things that might come up in the future. So it can be saying that you can have like an accurate knowledge of the labour market isn't always particularly straightforward. It can also ignore how sometimes people with different skills might do jobs in different ways but still be effective in them. So if you take teaching as a profession, you'd probably say that teaching has some fundamental sort of social aspects to it, but some people will approach teaching in a very creative way from a more artistic point of view, while other people will really approach teaching from more like a project management or a sort of a persuasion sort of point of view. So sometimes it's not always a good thing to be. It's not always possible to classify jobs strictly in terms of the skills that are needed, and sometimes actually having people with different skills doing the same job can be an effective part of building good teams. So things aren't always that simple. Also, in terms of being able to classify people into these roles, it really ignores the ways that people change and develop over time, and it really ignores the ways that people might find a job meaningful for things other than whether they're good at it or not. It ignores things like organizational culture and sort of social goals or work-life balance as important things that make up people's careers. So that's sort of matching-based sort of careers or matching-based careers theories. In many ways, the ideas that come after matching are ways of sort of critiquing and thinking differently about what you actually have in these matching-based sort of ideas. So the first big critique that came up of matching is what we call developmental theory. Developmental theory is all to do with change. And developmental theory, how people's sort of careers change, develop over time, is an old set of ideas, sort of went back to the 1920s in some senses, but was really popularized and came to the forefront in the late 50s and the early 60s through somebody called Donald Super. So this diagram here, this is called Super's life rainbow. It describes different stages that people go through in life, from birth and growth right the way through to the maintenance and decline period of people's lives. And it also picks out the different social roles that people have, which you might see as the different strands of the rainbow: the homemaker, worker, citizen, leisurite, student, child. And what Super's trying to describe with this is, rather than looking at how people can make good career decisions, he tries to look at how people do, in fact, make career decisions, or the different things that influence people's careers decisions over time. So he says how people will think about their career will change as they move through different phases of life. Your career needs will be different when you're exploring possibilities, as if you're established or if you're sort of the later years of your life. It will also say that your career development needs and how you think about your career can often sort of be played out by the different roles in your life. So interestingly, he only has worker, what people might see as the main thing to do with their career, as one of the things that make up an individual's career. He also sees being a homemaker or a parent, being a citizen, being a student, being a child, and so on, as all valid parts of people's careers, which can be helpful for sort of recognizing some unpaid forms of labor to do with caring or volunteering or sort of things you do to contribute towards your local community as valid parts of what makes up career, even if it's not directly what you're being paid for. But he also draws attention to the way that sometimes people's careers can be born out of a sense of conflict between these roles. Maybe young people would often have a conflict between what it means for them to be a child and what it means for them to be a student. What they want to excel in at school may be different from what their parents want them to excel in. And career is slightly formed by the conflict between these different areas. So what we see Super doing is moving away from like a very sort of rational, you make a one-off decision and that suits you out for life, and really sort of describing career as something that changes over time and something that involves different spaces in your life. So he really draws attention to the developmental and social aspects of career. Though as a tool, it doesn't necessarily solve any career problems off the bat. It isn't like matching, which gives you a clear way of solving problems, but it gives you different questions that you might want to be asking, or different sort of forces that might be acting on the young people that you're working with in a particular role. It draws attention to maybe the role that parents have, or the role that their ideas about citizenship might have on their career. Also, different levels of maturity at different stages of life also opens up different sort of questions around the things which are forming people's careers. So it encourages you to move away from career as just thinking about a sort of clinical decision that you make, in almost like sort of a laboratory type sort of limited manner, and really sort of starts trying to expand people's horizons to seeing how career is formed out of the different stages that they're in life and the different roles that are played in life. Now, you might have some problems with particularly sort of the developmental stages. You can see some of sort of the 1950s, 60s sort of ethos coming through in Super's work. I think many people nowadays, for lots of reasons, would probably stay away from saying that people start declining at the age of 65. And there may be some stereotypes about people tending to sort of settle down into married life from their mid-20s, which has sort of shifted. And you might sort of say that some of these things are culturally positioned and that people of different cultures will move through different stages at different points. But the idea of moving through different stages of your life and the idea of having different roles that you play that conflict and support each other and sort of combine together to make your career, I think are very interesting ideas, and starts moving away from career as being about making sort of simple, straightforward decisions and into a sort of interaction with a series of different factors. And these different factors really underpin the next set of ideas, which is what you might call social theory. So social theory really starts to describe the way that that different people and the world that you're part of affects your career. Matching gives the impression that your career is basically something that happens in your head, where you make a clear decision about the options that are available to you. Social theory draws attention to the different people that are involved. I think sometimes it can be helpful to see the different ages that, or the different sort of parts of sort of 20th century history that various theories come out of. Social theory was mainly developed by a couple of English theorists working in the 1970s. So if you think of 1970s Britain, winter of discontent, sort of more focused around social inequality, end of the baby boomer era, moving into the Thatcher years, some of these social ideas have some amount of resonance in those sorts of situations. So the first set of ideas is from a guy called Ken Roberts, who talked about opportunity structure. Roberts was a determinist. He would argue that the structures that are part of people's lives determine the opportunities that are available to them. He's sort of describing career as a bit like a set of train tracks, and that your situation at birth or the social situation and that develops around you, to a large extent, determines when you end up in life. So people who are born into working class communities where there's lots of industry are likely to go into those industries. People who are born into middle class families where there are lots of professional roles, lots of lawyers and accountants, and sort of managers and project managers are likely to follow the people that that they are born alongside into those same careers. It seems like those structures exist in the world. And Roberts sort of points out various different things that make up the structures. He draws attention to family background, to education. And by education, he doesn't so much mean how well people do in education as the sorts of education that are available to people. Sort of thinking about grammar schools or private education or going to sort of a state secondary modern. So the education that's available to you. To look at labour market processes, so what the economy is doing. If you think about things like Brexit at the moment, there's attention to a big sort of labour market, something which is affecting the labour market and creates a labour market process. Individuals' peer groups, and particularly how those peer groups might give people particular opportunities or stop people from having particular opportunities. And the general environment that they live in, about the physical geography, like are there transport links in where they live? Are there lots of jobs in the local area? All of these structures, Robert sees as sort of adding together to create the world as it is. Roberts was very sort of strong in his determinism. He says that career choice, he basically saw it as a myth, that people don't decide on the careers that are available to them, but that rather than career choice, you should be thinking about opportunity structure and career adjustment, which means that people should be encouraged and supported to adjust to the opportunities that are available to them. Now, you may not want to go as far as Roberts does in terms of sort of the stark determinism that he discusses, but what he draws attention to is that life isn't as simple as deciding what you want to be, and if you make a good decision, you'll be able to get there. That there are opportunities which curtail people. Is a structure to our world which limits us. So Roberts really talks about opportunity structure and sort of the social aspect of careers in very structured ways. But there is an alternative view which was developed by somebody called Bill Law. So Bill Law originally wrote in response to Ken Roberts, and what he tries to do is to sit career between psychological and social factors. So he saw some people, maybe like matching theorists, people like John Holland, has just seen career as something that runs around an individual's head, just about them making a good decision, and entirely ignored the external world, while other people, Roberts, for example, just looked at the social structures that people were born into and ignored any possibility for people to make decisions or have any agency for themselves. Law wanted to talk about community interaction. So the communities that we're part of affect us and how we think about careers, but they don't affect us so much on a structural level as an individual psychological level. So he draws links between the social world we're part of and how we end up thinking about career. He saw this as coming through 5 main processes, which, just to outline quickly, were feedback, so things that are said to people by other people. You're good at that, you're not good at that. Expectations, not things which are direct statements, but just sort of hearing what people think about jobs. So sort of maybe particular jobs are looked down upon and just sort of discussed negatively, or you get sort of expectations around you need to be able to earning enough to make something of yourself in the world, or that that university students should be aiming for graduate careers, just sort of the social expectations that you hear from other people. Modeling. So modeling is when you look up to somebody, and in some ways you start trying to act like them and sort of follow patterns in their lives. Information, which is just sort of the way that the world is described by other people. There are lots of opportunities around here. The economy is doing worse than it used to. If somebody wants to be getting on in the world, they need to be going into engineering. It's only posh people who end up going into law. Those sorts of statements which are said about the world, which end up informing people's careers. And finally, support. So things that people directly do to enable you to move forward. Maybe just that might be in the form of encouragement, or it might be in the form of opening doors and giving you particular opportunities. So through these processes, Law says the community and the communities that you're part of will shape your thinking about career. But because he sees it happening on a psychological level rather than a structural level, that firstly raises the opportunity for people to think differently, for education to get involved in these processes and provide alternative ways of thinking to young people. And because it's about your communities that you're part of, education can also create a role through creating alternative communities, through teacher support, through mentoring programs, through people from industry coming into schools and providing information about particular careers. School can become an alternative community which can create opportunities. Which is, I think, some of the ideas you see coming through in the Gatsby benchmarks about the importance of employer engagement, or the importance of sort of labour market information, personal support. So law tries to sit between sort of the structural world and the psychological world, and look at the important part that communities have, but seeing this as being played out at a psychological level, which shapes people's thinking, but isn't final, that people's thinking could be continually shaped through the same processes. So that's social theory. Next, we come on to constructivist theory. Constructivism is a bit of a funny word. You may not come across it much in everyday life, but it basically refers to the way that people end up creating their own ideas about the world. So how we see the world, and particularly what we see as being important to us, is a construct, something we make for ourselves. It isn't something which we inherit. It isn't something which society sort of imprints onto us, but that we're kind of, from a constructivist point of view, we're kind of authors of our own stories. We create what is important to us, and as we write our scripts, as we determine what's important, we end up putting those scripts into practice. So it draws attention to the importance of individual values, and sort of the actions that people make to try and make sense out of the world around them. Try and put some meat on the bone. Let's look at some ideas from somebody called Mark Savakas, writing initially sort of in the 90s and into the 21st century. Savakas described the importance of career construction in understanding people's careers. He drew attention, I'm not going to read the entire quote out, but he drew attention to the importance of the whys in people's lives, so the individual motivations that people have. He saw those individual motivations are something which was created by the individual, but something that sat alongside what you saw as what and how. So what is like your personality, the things which are sort of more objective about what you are good at and what you're not good at, and the how of adaptability, so what you need to do to get into an actual career. So Savakas referred to life design as being a process that was driven by why, sort of your individual constructs, your motivations and drivers, but also incorporated what types, so skills and abilities, and how, your ability to adapt and cope with the changing world. So he really drew attention to the subjective, sort of what makes us as individuals, and how we form our personalities for ourselves through how we interpret the world and how we write our own stories, so to speak. So he looked very much at the importance of stories and patterns in our lives for understanding what's important to us, and the way that these stories, these scripts, these things which are important to us can create possible futures for us to choose between. So Savakas and other constructivists really draw attention to the importance of motivation and personal drive behind career. One of the problems with big sort of structural programs that can occur in schools or colleges or universities is they can sometimes remove the more personal element. They can forget that individuals need to be motivated. Sometimes career programs can be too focused on what people need and not enough on actually engaging people with why career is meaningful for themselves. You may have an amazing program with lots of employee engagement opportunities, lots of support around writing applications, but if you can't grab people's attention, if you can't tap into their unique motivations, then all that support isn't going to mean much to them. What constructivism really challenges us to do is to go back to individuals to help them understand where their personal motivation is, and then give them support in working through that motivation in terms of the opportunities that are available to them. So, last but not least, chance-based theory. Chance-based theory started really occurring in the 21st century, and really looks at the part that luck plays in our world. It really sort of looks at the world of work as a world that is changing, and looks at individuals' careers as things which aren't necessarily planned out in advance, and managed through careful steps, but where the unexpected and the uncertain makes a big difference to people, and where planning isn't normally the best way of thinking about people's careers. Just ask yourself, if you get back to being 8 or 18 or 28, depending on how old you are you doing now what you intended to do then? Most people find it pretty difficult to predict the future, and that's not really surprising. And so maybe we should be questioning whether making sort of clear career decisions and sort of planning out through careful steps around what we want to become or what we could become is actually that helpful. And there might be a different approach. So such a different approach was initially put forward by John Krumboltz. So Krumboltz, in a book called Luck is No Accident, which I think is quite helpful for as just is giving you the main point of the book in the title, says indecision is a sensible response to an uncertain world. So often we can think that not having decided about our careers is a bad thing, that a mature person should have a clear view of what they want to be. But Krumboltz says actually planning things out and kind of trying to predict things, particularly distant things like a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old trying to predict what they might do at 21 or 31 or 41, isn't particularly likely to hold much water in a world where uncertainty around the job opportunities and uncertainty about ourselves sort of pervades our experience, you could say. So if we can't plan things, does this mean we need to leave things out to chance? Well, as Krumboltz says, luck is no accident. So some people, most people would say that luck has played a part in their careers, but there are things that we can do which will increase our chance of being lucky. So Krumboltz draws attention to personal attitudes of things like curiosity, persistence, flexibility, optimism, that these sort of these personal attributes can kind of give us the ability to cope with uncertainty. It isn't so much about trying to put off making decisions, but rather than deciding on a particular thing, having a general openness to being curious about the world, not giving up when things are difficult, having a flexibility where we're prepared to consider a range of different options, having the optimism to keep going when the world isn't what we want it to be. So often these attributes and attitudes which can make a difference to somebody's careers, more than whether they've got a good plan in place. So maybe this sort of draws attention to whether school careers work should really be about big people making decisions and coming up with these plans, particularly when you're asking somebody at 14 to decide what they're going to do at 18 or 21 or 31. This seems very difficult to do. And instead, actually encouraging people to hold loosely to decisions, that they should have a flexible approach to decision making, but instead should develop curiosity, persistence, and optimism instead. So Krumboltz, through his sort of chance-based career, really draws attention to the importance of being flexible and having the right attitudes for our career above having a fixed plan. So those are the 5 main sort of strands around career development. Hopefully you find it interesting hearing a bit about those thinkers, about those different ideas. And you can see the way that they have slightly different focuses around what makes career development, how we describe career development, and by implication, what we should be doing in terms of career interventions.